The job of leader has never been more challenging. Leaders are on the front lines of executing the strategies for their organizations. And it's never been harder for an organization to have sustained competitive advantage than it is today. In fact, many leaders will say that they feel as though they're being cut adrift from their traditional moorings. What might have worked in the past isn't working quite as well today. Radical uncertainty is the norm. Leaders have to cope with tremendous change in the external context. There are many elements that make leadership different today than it's been in the past. The first element, and I'll talk about 6, the first element is reach into the organization. When organizations were much more hierarchical in nature, there were fewer leaders. Today, as companies are flattening their organizational structures, even individuals who may not have the title, the formal title of leader, may be leading a critical work stream for a company. As a result, we say leadership has become democratized, and there are more leaders that companies need to train than ever before. In addition, when there was more hierarchy and more bureaucracy in organizations, command and control models of leadership were more effective. Today, as companies find that they have to flatten those structures and they're working in much more agile manners, agility and collaboration become critical frameworks for leaders to embrace. The critical task of the leader in the past was focused on execution. Today, it's not just about execution. It's about empowering the team, shaping the team context, and innovation. And leaders are not just leading direct reports who simply execute pre-established priorities. Rather, they are leading agile teams that innovate. And what needs to be developed in leaders is not so much skill sets, but we've moved to needing to develop mindsets in leaders. Agility, customer-centricity, diversity mindset, and we'll talk more about that. And finally, as I said before, it's not just about execution anymore. The primary core competency of the leader today must be about innovation, because it is only through innovation that a company will find a way to continue to have a sustained competitive advantage in the market. So those are fundamental shifts. And when we talk about managed empowerment and making the team empowered to execute on the strategic agenda, the job of leader is to make sure that the context that that team operates in is optimized for innovation, agility, and effective decision making. And that is very different from directing the team to execute on the leader's specific agenda. So I like this quote because I think it really speaks to the point. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather the wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. When you think about empowering the team context and the job of leader to empower the team context, that's really what we're talking about. It's not deciding everything for the team, but it's setting up the right context. Not giving the team all the answers, but helping the team ask the right questions. And it's helping leaders move away from legacy command and control models of leadership to more coaching models of leadership, to creating a learning-oriented, democratic style of leadership. So instead of the leader saying, do what I say and here's how you do it, the directive style, leaders need to move more to, this might help, try this, or what do you think? What can you learn? Very, very different leadership style that's required today. And this can be hard for some leaders because their natural instinct is to take control. But they have to progress to this more democratic learning zone in order to be effective leaders in the digital economy. This means that new mindsets have to be developed in leaders. When we talk about mindsets, it's about a whole framing, reframing how the leader thinks about things. What are some of these mindsets? Agility, experimentation mindset, inclusivity, making sure that there is diversity of thought, resiliency, right? Thriving despite all of this external uncertainty and tremendous change in the external environment. Creativity mindset. How do we foster creative thinking and acceptance of novel ideas? And a customer-centric mindset. Those organizations that are going to survive are the ones that are most customer-obsessed. So you have to have customer-centric mindsets operating in your leaders. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these competencies. So embracing diversity and inclusivity. Really, really important for leaders to embrace diversity of thought, right? To promote and model psychological safety so that everyone's thinking is incorporated into coming up with novel solutions. Creating space for divergent thinking. Actively recruiting diversity of thought. Looking for ways to bring in new opinions, new ideas from other parts of the organization. This is a mindset. And leaders who can adopt a diversity, inclusivity mindset are going to be better innovators and are going to foster greater innovation in their teams. Customer centricity. Again, these are leaders that are great at collaborating cross-functionally to improve customer outcomes. They're leaders who are thinking about being tireless advocates for their customers. They set very high standards for satisfying customers, continuously looking and learning for new ideas to solve problems on behalf of their customers. It's a mindset. But customer centricity is an important mindset to create in leaders today. Cross-functional collaboration. We need leaders who are systems thinkers. Leaders who can think about how to work effectively across all of the different functional areas of the organization to bring together solutions on behalf of customers. Instead of thinking about your function in isolation, leaders absolutely have to look at the organization as a system and have to embrace all of the different parts of the organization and how they can come together on behalf of solving problems for the customers. So we need leaders that have that cross-functional collaborative mindset. Experimentation. Many leaders are risk averse, and this goes counter to learning. They need to be more comfortable with experimenting, with trying things. So this experimentation mindset is critical for driving innovation. And if we say the core role of the leader today is to drive innovation on behalf of the organization in order to create sustainable competitive advantage, then leaders need to have an experimentation mindset. They need to be willing to take some risks, to look at and imagine all of the possibilities, and to go after the most promising opportunities. And they need to leverage information that can help them generate new ideas. So experimentation mindset is key. Now, some people will say, well, how do we create, or naturally ask the question, how do we develop these mindsets in our leaders? It's a shift. And we know that leader development is a function basically of three things when we put it in its simplest equation. Formal training, formal learning, learning from other people in a developmental network, and then on-the-job learning. It turns out that most of a leader's development happens through assignments, stretch assignments on the job. But 10% is through formal training. And you actually can develop leader mindsets, new leader mindsets through formal training. The key is to figure out, how do you do that well? What can we learn? What can brain science tell us about how to optimize that 10% of formal training for leaders? And this is where we have to look at what is actually happening in a leader's brain when they're going through training for higher order soft skills and for example, courses that might develop new mindsets, novel mindsets in leaders. So we've done a lot of research into understanding using technologies like EEG technology, where we can actually look at the effect of consuming a piece of video-based content on activity in the brain, primarily prefrontal cortex. And we can actually see if using certain types of approaches in training leaders work better than others in terms of stimulating activity in the brain. And through our research, what we found is very interesting, and that is that when you teach leadership competencies, leadership mindsets, using storytelling or scenario-based approaches in formal training content, it actually drives much more engagement and improves learning outcomes when you compare that to traditional approaches for formal leader training, like instructor-led approaches. So we know that to make that 10% of formal learning very effective, we need to use storytelling, we need to use scenario, we need to be able to model human behavior and show how a leader can operate in the context of the team environment using these new mindsets, using these new approaches. And that is what will make leaders more effective in operating in the ways that we talked about that are required for effective leadership in the digital economy. So one of the things that we have done at Skillsoft, for example, is created a whole new program for leadership development using scenario-based instructional methods. And again, this is very much grounded in evidence-based brain science research where we can model the human behaviors, the effective behaviors of leaders and show leaders in the context of the team, not in isolation. And we're not talking about what a leader should do, we are showing through an engaging storyline what a leader should do in order to demonstrate these new mindsets and operate with these new mindsets in an organization. So part of this program is about making sure that we have the opportunity to develop leaders against the new set of competencies required in the digital economy. And we talked about some of these. Leading with a customer-centric culture, coordinating with your leader peers, the cross-functional nature of leadership, leading through the challenge of change, leading innovation. These are all critical digital age competencies that we need to teach, but we need to teach them using the most effective mode of teaching, which is a scenario-based training model. And when you think about it, at the end of the day, if leadership is democratizing and we need to reach more leaders than ever before, you need to rely on a very effective, scalable approach to training larger populations of leaders. And that is where having a technology-enabled solution like video-based courses that can be rolled out on a learning experience platform will be key for organizations. Again, the challenge is how do you do this effectively? Part of this, too, when you're talking about formal training of leaders, is to be able to make sure that after they've received formal training in these competencies, in these new mindsets, they have plenty of opportunity to practice with their teams. So having resources for reinforcement of the new mindsets and behaviors and an opportunity using resources to practice those new mindsets and competencies within the context of their teams is critical. So self-assessments, leader-led activities, team facilitation guides, all of these have to be part of a formal leadership development program. It's something that we include as resources in our program. We've won a lot of awards for this program, very, very proud of it. It's a very innovative, novel approach, again, for tackling that formal development part that needs to be a component of any leadership development program. And we're starting to see, having rolled this out, tremendous success across our customer base in helping these organizations develop their leaders against the new paradigm of operating as a leader in the digital economy. Again, very, very different to be a leader today than it has been before. New competencies required, new training approaches required to teach those competencies and those new mindsets for success in the digital economy. Thank you.